Sign number 5. She is the same person in private as she is in public. Have you ever met someone who seemed absolutely wonderful in front of other people, but completely different when no one else was around? They were patient in public, short tempered in private, kind to strangers, disrespectful to the people closest to them, generous when everyone was watching, self centered when nobody could see. That's one of the biggest lessons you'll ever learn about character. Character isn't who someone pretends to be, it's who they consistently are when pretending no longer benefits them. Let's go back to David and Grace. One Saturday afternoon, David invited Grace to his younger sister's birthday celebration. It wasn't a fancy event. No expensive restaurant, no glamorous setting. Just a backyard barbecue with family, children running around, grandparents telling old stories, and everyone pitching in wherever they could. David was busy helping his uncle prepare the food, so for almost an hour, Grace was on her own. Later that evening, David's mother pulled him aside. She smiled and said, "You've chosen a thoughtful woman." David looked confused. "What do you mean?" His mother replied, "When no one asked her to help, she noticed your grandmother struggling to carry drinks and quietly stepped in. She spent time talking with your little cousins. She even stayed behind to help clean up after everyone else had left." Grace never mentioned any of it. She wasn't trying to impress David. In fact, she probably assumed he hadn't even noticed. And that's exactly why it mattered. Her kindness wasn't a performance, it was simply part of who she was. As a woman, I can tell you something I've learned over the years. It's relatively easy to act like a wonderful partner for a few hours. Anyone can be charming on a first date. Anyone can say the right things while they're trying to win someone's heart. The real question is, who are they when there's nothing to gain? How do they respond when they're tired, when they're disappointed, when nobody is complimenting them, when life feels ordinary? Because that's where character lives. One of the biggest mistakes people make while dating is falling in love with someone's best moments. Instead, pay attention to their ordinary ones. How does she treat the cashier after a long day? Does she speak respectfully about people who aren't present? When she makes a mistake, does she own it? Or does she always find someone else to blame? These little moments may not seem exciting, but they're often the clearest windows into someone's heart. I remember hearing a pastor say something that has stayed with me for years. He said, asterisk, what you repeatedly do in private eventually becomes who you are in public. I think that's true. Integrity isn't built during big moments. It's built through thousands of small choices that nobody applauds. The woman who's right for you doesn't need an audience to be kind. She doesn't need recognition to be generous. She doesn't become respectful only when she's trying to make a good impression. Her public life simply reflects her private character. There's another sign of consistency that's easy to overlook. She speaks about people with grace. Now, that doesn't mean she never notices flaws. We're all human. But she isn't constantly tearing people down. She doesn't gossip just to feel important. She doesn't enjoy humiliating others. Because people who find joy in destroying someone else's reputation eventually bring that same habit into their closest relationships. And one day, the person she's speaking negatively about may become you. Jesus said in asterisk Luke chapter 6, verse 45, asterisk, for the mouth speaks what the heart is full of. That's such a powerful reminder. Words don't appear out of nowhere. They reveal what's already living inside us. So pay attention to the way she speaks, not just to you, but about everyone else. Here's another moment from David and Grace's story. A few weeks after the family gathering, David accidentally made an embarrassing mistake during a dinner with friends. He spilled an entire glass of water across the table. Everyone laughed, including David. Grace laughed too, but later, when one of the group started making jokes that crossed the line, she gently changed the subject. She didn't embarrass David further. She protected his dignity without making a scene. That may seem like a small moment. It wasn't. Because love doesn't expose. Love protects. That's exactly what 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verse 7 means when it says, quote, love always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres, end quote. Notice the first word, protects. The right woman protects your dignity, even when you're not at your best. Before we move to the next sign, ask yourself this question. If nobody ever saw how she treated me, would I still describe her as kind, respectful, and trustworthy? Because that's the real test. Anyone can perform goodness. Very few people consistently live it. And that's why character is so valuable. It doesn't change depending on who's watching. But even character isn't the final piece. Because the woman who's right for you won't just have good character. She'll quietly inspire you to become a better man without trying to control who you are. And that's one of the most beautiful qualities you'll ever experience in a relationship. Sign number 6. She inspires you to become better without trying to control you. Have you ever noticed the difference between someone who inspires change and someone who demands it? At first, they can look very similar. Both may encourage you to improve. Both may point out areas where you can grow. But their motives and the way they go about it are completely different. One says, I believe in who you're becoming. The other says, you'll only be enough when you become who I want you to be. That difference changes everything. Let's go back to David and Grace. A few months after David stepped into his leadership role, life became busier than either of them expected. Long hours, constant meetings, weekend phone calls. Without realizing it, David began neglecting some of the habits that once gave him balance. He stopped exercising. He rarely visited his parents. Even his prayer life became inconsistent. One evening after dinner, Grace looked at him and gently said, "Can I tell you something without you thinking I'm criticizing you?" David smiled. "Of course." She paused before continuing. "I've noticed you've been carrying a lot lately. You're working harder than ever, but I'm worried you're slowly losing the parts of yourself that made you who you are." David didn't feel attacked. He didn't feel judged. He felt seen. Grace wasn't trying to change his personality. She was reminding him not to lose himself. There's a beautiful difference between control and encouragement. Control says, "Become the person I need you to be." Encouragement says, don't forget the person you already have the potential to become. As a woman, I believe one of the greatest gifts you can give your partner is the freedom to grow without making them feel like they're constantly being evaluated. Think about a gardener. A gardener doesn't pull on a plant to make it grow faster. A gardener nurtures it, gives it what it needs, and allows it to grow organically. That's how we should treat our relationships. Introducing suggestions and encouragement without being too harsh or showing too much judgment is like saying to your partner, I see your potential and I want to watch you grow into it. That would only damage it. Instead, they provide sunlight, water, healthy soil, time. Growth happens naturally because the environment supports it. Healthy relationships work the same way. The right woman doesn't force transformation. She creates an environment where growth becomes possible. One of the clearest signs you've found someone special is this. You naturally want to become a better man. Not because you're afraid she'll leave, but because being with her reminds you of the kind of man you want to be. That's a completely different motivation. Fear produces temporary change. Inspiration produces lasting growth. I once heard a husband say, asterisk, my wife never asked me to become someone else. She simply loved me in a way that made me want to become the best version of myself. Asterisk. I thought that was beautiful because healthy love doesn't erase your identity. It strengthens it. Now, let me balance this. The right woman won't pretend you don't have flaws. She'll challenge you. She'll ask difficult questions. She'll lovingly point out blind spots. But she'll do it with grace, not contempt. One of the strongest predictors of a healthy relationship isn't whether difficult conversations happen. It's whether those conversations leave you feeling hopeless or hopeful. Do you leave thinking, asterisk, I'll never be enough? Or do you leave thinking, I can grow, and she's willing to grow with me? That's an enormous difference. Ephesians asterisk asterisk 4:15 gives us a wonderful principle. Speaking the truth in love, we will grow to become in every respect the mature body of Him who is the head, that is, Christ. Notice those two words, truth and love. Truth without love becomes harsh. Love without truth becomes shallow. Healthy relationships need both. Grace understood that. She didn't ignore David's unhealthy habits, but she also didn't attack his character. She addressed the behavior while protecting the person. That's emotional maturity. And honestly, it's one of the rarest qualities you'll find today. Before we move to our final sign, I want you to ask yourself this question. Since meeting her, have I become more patient, more responsible, more emotionally mature, more like the man I want to be? Or have I become more anxious, more insecure, more exhausted, more like someone I barely recognize? Because the right relationship doesn't just make your life happier, it quietly makes your character stronger. And that's far more valuable than temporary excitement. Which brings us to the final sign. In my opinion, it's the one that ties everything we've talked about together. Because the woman who's right for you won't spend her life trying to complete you. She'll walk beside you, as the two of you build something far greater than either of you could build alone. Sign number 7. She chooses partnership over perfection. If you've stayed with me until this point, I hope you've noticed something. Not one of these 7 signs had anything to do with beauty. Not one depended on social status. Not one was about finding a woman who never makes mistakes. Because the woman who's right for you isn't perfect. She simply possesses the kind of character that allows imperfect people to build an extraordinary relationship together. Let's finish David and Grace's story. About 2 years after they first met, David decided it was time. He bought a ring, planned a quiet evening at the park where they'd had one of their very first conversations. He had rehearsed everything he wanted to say. But when the moment finally came, he forgot almost all of it. He laughed nervously, looked at Grace, and simply said, "You know, when we first met, I thought I was looking for someone who would make me happy." He paused. "But somewhere along the way, I realized I found someone who made me want to become a better man." Grace smiled, her eyes filling with tears. Before he even reached for the ring, she quietly interrupted him. "David, do you know why I love you?" He shook his head. She said, "Because from the very beginning, you've never treated this relationship like it was you against me. It's always been us, learning, growing, and building together." That's partnership, not perfection. Partnership. And I think that's one of the most misunderstood ideas in modern relationships. Today, people often look for someone who checks every box, someone who never disappoints them, someone who agrees with them all the time, someone who somehow meets every emotional need they have. But no human being can carry that responsibility. Eventually, every person will disappoint you. Not because they don't love you, because they're human. The question isn't, will she ever make mistakes? The question is, when mistakes happen, will the two of you choose each other over your pride? That's what lasting love is built on. As a woman, I don't believe the right relationship feels effortless. I believe it feels intentional. It requires grace, patience, forgiveness, communication, humility. And every single one of those qualities is a choice, day after day, year after year. I once heard an elderly husband, married for more than 50 years, say something I'll never forget. Someone asked him, "What's the secret to staying in love for so long?" He smiled and replied, "We never expected to marry the perfect person. We just promised to keep loving the imperfect person we chose." Isn't that beautiful? Because somewhere along the way, we've started believing that love survives because we find flawless people. It doesn't. Love survives because two imperfect people refuse to stop choosing each other. Now, let me say something that I hope every man watching hears clearly. Please don't use this video to create an impossible checklist. Don't watch this and think, asterisk, she missed one of these signs, so she can't be the right woman. That's not the point. The point is to recognize the overall direction of her character. Does she consistently bring peace? Does she respect you? Does she handle conflict with maturity? Does she encourage your growth? Is she consistent in private and public? Does she inspire you without trying to control you? Does she choose partnership instead of perfection? If the answer to those questions is generally yes, you found something incredibly valuable. Protect it. Invest in it. Don't take it for granted. Because relationships like that don't happen by accident. They are built. The Bible gives us a beautiful picture of this in Ecclesiastes chapter 4, verse 12. Though one may be overpowered, two can defend themselves. A cord of 3 strands is not quickly broken. I love that verse because it reminds us that the strongest relationships aren't built on two perfect people. They're built on two people who are committed to each other and who place God at the center of what they're building. That's the third strand, the one who strengthens both hearts when their own strength isn't enough. So, before we close, I'd like to leave you with one final question. When you think about the woman you're pursuing, do you admire her beauty or do you admire her character? Because beauty may be what first catches your attention, but character is what will hold your family together 20 years from now. Character is what will shape your future children. Character is what carries a marriage through sickness, financial struggles, disappointments, and seasons when feelings naturally rise and fall. That's why I'll leave you with the one sentence that summarizes everything we've talked about today. Beauty may capture your attention, but character determines whether love can survive. Never forget that. If today's conversation gave you a new perspective, I'd love for you to become part of our Both Sides of Love family. Like this video, subscribe if you haven't already, and let me know in the comments, which of these 7 signs do you think is the most important, and why? I genuinely enjoy reading your thoughts, and many of your experiences inspire future conversations here on the channel. Thank you for spending this time with me. Until next time, choose wisely, love intentionally, and remember this: the right woman isn't the one who makes life perfect. She's the one who faithfully walks beside you while the two of you build a life that's worth living. I'm Camille, and I'll see you in the next episode of Both Sides of Love.